Here, as a nation, we give thanks to you, Heavenly Father, for all that you have blessed us with. May those blessings continue for many years, and may we, your people, always be fully aware that you and no other entity are the source of these gifts. Amen.
Amen. The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harris.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Stauber, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great privilege to have my hometown priest open up the House of Representatives this morning, Father Richard Kunst. He's been a priest in the diocese in and around Duluth for 27 years, and he is a faithful servant of our Lord Jesus Christ, as reflected by his homilies on a daily basis. Not only is Father Richard Kunst a great friend to our family, but the Catholic family in and around Duluth, Minnesota. And I want to thank him for traveling all this way from Duluth, Minnesota to our nation's capital to open up the house prayer this morning. I am truly honored by his opening prayer, and I yield back.
The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Secretary.
I've been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed without amendment H.R. 1316, an act to amend the Export Control Reform Act of 2018 relating to licensing transparency.
The chair will entertain for up to 15 minutes for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? You're recognized. Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to honor a true American hero, a man who embodied and exemplified the very best of public service and selfless service. Mr. Chase Childers, a husband, father of 3, former police officer, and professional baseball player. Some of us in the chamber, including myself, we have worn the uniform and sworn an oath to protect and serve our communities. We understand the inherent risks, the split-second decisions, and the unwavering commitment required. And on July 13th, while on vacation with his beloved family in South Carolina, Mr. Childers jumped into action to save another family who were caught in a rip current. Total strangers, folks, not his own family, total strangers. Thanks to the courageous and selfless acts of Mr. Childers, the family of 5 made it back to the shore safely. Tragically, Mr. Childers did not. Mr. Childers' heroic actions serve as a reminder that heroism isn't confined to a uniform or a specific profession. May his memory be a blessing, and may his actions inspire us all to lend a helping hand to other families, friends, neighbors, and in this case, total strangers. God bless Mr. Childers and his loved ones. My family and I, prayers are with them, his beautiful wife, his 3 children, during this very, very difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is so much upheaval, so much concern that is going on in our country right now. Unemployment, Medicaid cuts, all of the things that are happening. But in the Virgin Islands this weekend, on my home island, we had our annual Tart Wars. The Tart Wars brings together the Virgin Islands community to celebrate and showcase our rich culinary traditions, placing fans of pineapple, guava, and coconut tarts in a fierce competition. Now, coconut tart did win this year. Not my favorite. But I would have you note that Virgin Islanders, the grand dames of Frederiksted, Claire Roker, Betty Lynch, and even Laverne Lala Joseph are all Team Guava. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, July 18, 2025, Columbia, South Carolina was blessed as Leah Grace Denny Blackwell and Matthew Blackwell joyfully welcomed their handsome son, Graham Thomas Blackwell, into the world. A very special gift just 2 days ahead of her own birthday. Born at Prisma Health Baptist Hospital at 2:03 a.m., weighing 6 pounds 9 ounces and measuring 19 inches long, Graham has entered a loving, prominent, nurturing home. I am grateful for Leah Grace, who is a dedicated long-term staff member in the Washington office, serving as senior policy advisor, while Matt was a former staff member who is now with Duke Energy. Graham is blessed to be born into a home that will guide him through a bright and fulfilling future, encouraged by his wonderful grandparents, Tony and Beverly Denny, and Bart and Paula Blackwell, who are all appreciated as devoted statewide community leaders. On behalf of my wife, Roxanne, our entire family and staff, I extend the warmest congratulations to the happy Blackwell family. May the years ahead be filled with joy, love, and blessings. God bless Graham Thomas Blackwell. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Yes, unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Americans expect Congress to complete the basic work of government before leaving town for recess, not least of which is passing the 12 funding bills for fiscal year 2026. Having passed only 2 bills, it is absurd that Republicans have decided to pack it up early. Meanwhile, millions fear what Republican cuts to Medicaid will mean for their families. Shoppers are tightening their belts because of record prices for chicken and beef. Businesses are stymied by President Trump's on-again, off-again tariffs. Taco or not taco is the question they are asking. Why are Republicans rushing to take a break when so many Americans can't even catch a break? Simply put, Republicans are running scared of a titanic presidential temper tantrum over releasing the Epstein files. My Democratic colleagues and I are here to work, to lower costs and grow our economy, to build healthier and safer communities, and to ensure strong national security and strong national defense. I implore my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join us. Let's get back to work and deliver the results the American people
Gentleman's time
sent
has
us
expired.
here to achieve. I yield back.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of T.J. Costello, a leader of the Charlotte community who unexpectedly passed away on July 8, 2025. Mr. Costello's life was marked by sacrifice and service to his country as a Marine, leading combat operations in Iraq, and then to our local community as a business leader and faithful church volunteer. He also served my district by guiding hundreds of young North Carolinians through the nomination process at the U.S. Naval Academy, of which he is a proud alumnus. A devoted family man, TJ married his high school sweetheart, Julia, and had 3 beloved children. And I'd like to remind them that 1 Corinthians declares, "No eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagines what God has prepared for those who love him." I ask my colleagues today to join me in celebrating the wonderful life and legacy of T.J. Costello. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Donald Trump and this Republican Congress just enacted the largest transfer of wealth in history. They cut 15 million people off of their health care and decimated food assistance for working families to give tax breaks to billionaires. Last week, I joined my dear friend, Representative Ayanna Pressley, and Project Bread in Boston to hear directly from people experiencing food insecurity about how the big, ugly bill will make their lives more difficult. We heard from hungry moms and grandmothers, food pantry leaders, local officials. Each and every person who participated in the roundtable spoke about how the big, ugly bill will increase hunger. If Trump and Republicans in Congress spent 5 minutes listening to anyone living paycheck to paycheck, they'd know how devastating these cuts are. In Massachusetts, we are crafting a plan to prevent families from going hungry amid these reckless federal cuts. Governor Maura Healey, her administration, and local advocates are forming an anti-hunger task force to adopt long-term solutions to support families in Massachusetts and work to finally ending hunger now. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I have asked Attorney General Pam Bondi to open an investigation into the Fire Aid concert that took place in the aftermath of the devastating Los Angeles fires. What has happened, what we have learned, is absolutely beyond belief. In the aftermath of these fires, which destroyed 18,000 homes and killed, tragically, 30 people, there was a Fire Aid concert in which a number of high-profile musicians generously agreed to perform, and people responded in an amazing way. Tens of thousands of people donated, raising $100 million for what they were told was direct relief for the victims. But now we've learned that this money didn't go to the victims at all. Instead, it went to nonprofits, some of which have nothing to do with fire relief, where they promote things like voting and civic engagement and multi-generational power building. Some of them aren't even located in LA. So I've asked the Attorney General to open an investigation in order to restore the intent of the donors, in order to make the victims whole and to bring accountability. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the life of Bob Stein, a friend, a teacher, and a brilliant mind who passed away last week after living an equally brilliant life. I had the privilege of knowing Bob throughout my entire public service career. When he wasn't cycling, Bob was a professor at Rice University, where he spent 46 years being a leading voice on elections, disaster response, and local government. But to call Bob just a professor wouldn't capture who he truly was. His classroom extended far beyond Rice. He had a remarkable habit of turning local officials into students, and I was proud to be one of them. Bob Stein spent his whole life helping this nation live up to his promise. And to his wife, Marty, and his children, thank you for sharing them with us. You know that if you plan to run for office in Houston, you had to sit down and talk to Bob Stein. So on behalf of a grateful city and a grateful nation, thank you, Bob. May you enjoy your cycling in heaven. God bless. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the 100th anniversary of Indian River County, Florida, founded on June 29, 1925. For a century, this community has stood as a jewel on the Treasure Coast, a place where history, culture, and natural beauty come together in extraordinary ways. It has grown from humble roots to a thriving community, celebrating a strong economy, welcoming neighborhoods, and stunning environment. From the pristine shores of Vero Beach to the citrus groves of Fellsmere, Indian River County embodies the very best of Florida living. Today, we recognize and celebrate a century in paradise. Congratulations to the people of Indian River County on your 100th anniversary and 100 remarkable years. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The news is louder than a toddler with a kazoo at a Metallica concert. So while the headlines scream, the internet screams even louder with a monologue known as Meanwhile. Meanwhile, Paramount settles a lawsuit with President Trump over a dispute that could have been easily dismissed, defended as freedom of the press, or not. Meanwhile, Paramount CBS is seeking a multi-million-dollar merger with Skydance Media that requires the approval of the very same Trump administration. Coincidence? Surely not. Meanwhile, the Trump administration calls for media fairness, the kind perhaps shown by Fox, OAN, and Newsmax, maybe. Meanwhile, Stephen Colbert, host of the show Late Night, #1 amongst hosts in his slot, and a Trump critic, has his show canceled by CBS. A financial decision, it is said. No, yeah. Meanwhile, CBS great news leader Edward R. Murrow rolls over in his grave. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Oregon seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today as a mother, a physician, and a member of Congress horrified by the ongoing massacre in Gaza. This is not a humanitarian crisis in abstract, and it is the result of choices leading to preventable famine. While bombs are leveling entire cities, the only so-called aid group allowed in, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is annihilating the very principles of neutrality and humanitarian relief. And now we are hearing reports that aid will be contingent on a ceasefire. Let me be clear, that is morally bankrupt. You do not negotiate over food. You do not bargain with medicine. You do not turn aid sites into death traps. Palestinians in Gaza deserve safety, dignity, and the right to self-determination, not starvation. Oregonians have been clear. The United States has a moral obligation to use its power to end this tragedy. A critical step is demanding the UN Relief and Works Agency is immediately reinstated in Gaza for large-scale aid delivery. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In upstate New York, we make things, and this past weekend we made history when Amphenol Aerospace celebrated its 100th anniversary in Sydney. Amphenol's is a century-old story of resilience, a community that rebuilt after floods, coming back stronger than before. It's a century-old story of American innovation with the world's most cutting-edge technologies rolling off our factory floors. It's a decades-old story of the power of labor, a true partnership between Amphenol and the Machinists Union with good jobs, good wages, and a strong middle class. And it's a century-old story of American strength. Amphenol's work defends our homeland. Above all, though, we are celebrating 100 years of a close-knit manufacturing town of less than 5,000 people where the thing that matters most is not whether you've got an R or a D next to your name, but whether you show up for your shift, do your job with pride, treat each other right, take care of your family, and love this country. To everyone at Amphenol, my family and I were honored to celebrate 100 years with you this weekend, and we're all in for the next 100. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair lays before the House an enrolled bill. Just one.
Senate 423, an act to protect regular order for budgeting for the Department of Veterans Affairs and for other purposes.
And the chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to Section 2B4 of Public Law 118-144, the Commission to study the potential transfer of the Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History to the Smithsonian Institute Act, I am pleased to appoint the following individual to the Commission to study the potential transfer of the Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History to the Smithsonian Institution. The Honorable Kathy Manning of Greensboro, North Carolina. Signed sincerely, Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic Leader.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4275 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4275, a bill to authorize appropriations for the Coast Guard to establish the Secretary of the Coast Guard and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Graves, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 4275.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 4275, which is the Coast Guard Reauthorization Act of 2025. The bill before us provides the men and women of the U.S. Coast Guard with the authorities and resources that they need to carry out their missions, which are critical to ensuring maritime safety, enforcing United States laws at sea, and protecting our nation's borders. The Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2025 authorizes Coast Guard funding for the fiscal years 2025 through 2029. The bill will support Coast Guard operations and enable the service to continue its efforts to recapitalize its cutter fleet, shoreline facilities, and its IT capabilities. The legislation builds upon the Reconciliation Act, which was signed into law by President Trump earlier this month, which provides historic investments for new air and sea assets and upgraded shoreside infrastructure. Additionally, the legislation establishes a Coast Guard Service Secretary, providing the Coast Guard parity with other military services and ensuring the service has a voice to advocate for its needs. The bill also advances the administration's vision to strengthen our domestic maritime sector by facilitating an increase in the pool of qualified United States merchant mariners. I very much appreciate Ranking Member Larson, Subcommittee Chair Ezell, and Subcommittee Ranking Member Carbajal for working to reach a bipartisan agreement on this bill, and I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record letter exchanges with the Armed Services Committee and Homeland Security Committee.
Without objection.
With that, Madam Speaker, I urge support for this legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves from California is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I am pleased to I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to rise in support of H.R. 4275, the Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2025. This bill is a prime example of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee bipartisanship under the leadership of Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Larson, and Chairman Ezell. As Ranking Member of the subcommittee, I am proud of all the good work that we have done on this bill to ensure that we reauthorize, enhance, and support the critical missions of the U.S. Coast Guard to save lives, protect our maritime environment, and prioritize service members both in and out of the workplace. These significant investments in the service signal our confidence in the capability of the Coast Guard to conduct each of the diverse missions to better serve the American people. This bill puts coasties first by addressing the need for more affordable and quality housing. It also provides enhancements of our coasties' quality of life, such as family leave policies, career flexibility, tuition assistance incentives, and behavioral health care. Equally important, this bill capitalizes on the extensive work that former Commandant Admiral Fagan did to make institutional changes to address sexual assault and sexual harassment. Our coasties deserve better, and this legislation provides oversight and the tools needed for the Coast Guard to prevent these crimes, protect victims, and hold perpetrators accountable. Moreover, I am proud that this bill includes several provisions that I sponsored regarding U.S. merchant mariners. This bill tackles long outdated methods for processing mariner credentials by investing in and revamping the Coast Guard's process. This bill also improves merchant mariner credentialing tests by ensuring the most relevant and technologically critical elements are included. We want the best mariners in the industry, and by removing outdated entry barriers, we will help ensure steady, long-term employment opportunities. I once again want to thank Chairman Graves on his leadership and bipartisan collaboration in crafting this bill. I am proud to have worked with my colleagues on this important legislation, and I look forward to seeing it pass into law. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. I reserve the remainder of my time.
The gentleman reserved. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I would yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Mississippi, Congressman Ezell, who
The
is also
gentleman is
the Coast Guard Chairman.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Chairman Graves and Carbajal. I rise today in support of this legislation, which was introduced by Chairman Graves, myself, and Ranking Members Larson and Carbajal. This bill supports the efforts of the Coast Guard to protect the United States waters, interdict drugs, stop human trafficking, and promote maritime safety. The Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2025 authorizes funding for the Coast Guard through fiscal year 2029 and makes critical investments to enable the service to meet its growing mission demands. As the Coast Guard works to implement Service's future vision of Force Design 2028 and procure new vessels, aircraft, shoreside infrastructure with the historic investments made in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, this legislation includes accountability for those investments and modernizes the contracting process for the service. As the Coast Guard looks to grow its forces, the legislation will support the Coast Guard's efforts to boost recruiting and retention while supporting President Trump's vision to strengthen the domestic maritime base and boost the pool of qualified United States merchant mariners that can mobilize during times of crisis to operate sea lift assets. The legislation also gives service an important voice by establishing a Coast Guard Service Secretary, and envisioned in my legislation, H.R. 2546, the Secretary of the Coast Guard Act of 2025. This measure also makes important reforms following revelations of the Operation Fouled Anchor, which was a report detailing improper handling of sexual assaults within the service. As a sheriff and a first-hand law enforcement officer, I've seen the harmful effects that have happened to these victims. I am pleased that the bill before us strengthens protections for members of the Coast Guard from sexual assault, provides support to victims, and increases transparency within the service about the manner in which such cases were handled. I appreciate the work of Chairman Graves on this legislation, along with Ranking Member Larson, Subcommittee Ranking Member Carbajal. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and Madam Chairman, I yield back my time.
The gentleman from Missouri reserves.
I reserve.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to yield 5 minutes to the representative from Washington, the state of Washington, Representative Larson.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm pleased to speak in support of H.R. 4275, the Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2025. This bipartisan legislation reauthorizes funding for the U.S. Coast Guard through 2029, updates and restructures Coast Guard programs and policies, and supports the commercial maritime industry. It is a result of good faith bipartisan negotiations between Chair Graves and Chair Ezell, myself, and Ranking Member Carbajal, and includes important contributions from members on and off the committee. This bill is the latest example of the bipartisanship on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and I'm very proud to support it. Coast Guard operational readiness is at risk due to years of underfunding. A lack of investment has led to a $3 billion shoreside infrastructure backlog, a lack of ice-breaking capacity in the Arctic and Great Lakes, and reduced capacity across several essential missions, such as mariner safety and mariner credentialing. The committee recognized this need, and H.R. 4275 begins to address the shortfall by authorizing the Coast Guard far beyond the administration's request. It increases Coast Guard funding levels to $21 billion by 2029, ensuring that the Coast Guard remains semper paratus. These funding levels will give the Coast Guard the resources needed to execute its missions and deliver a basic standard of living for its service members. In addition, the bill increases procurement, construction, and improvements funding by 100% over current funding levels, and these new resources should enable the Coast Guard to maintain its ongoing recapitalization programs, including the polar security cutters and the offshore patrol cutters. Last Congress, we enacted substantial improvements to safety for mariners and passengers aboard vessels. This legislation builds upon that work by addressing additional safety risks on vessels and increasing the penalties for bad actors. This bill fights oil spill pollution by bolstering vessel response plans and ensuring timely, robust firefighting responses when vessel incidents do occur. It also requires the Coast Guard to evaluate international oil spill coordination and ensures robust protections and response capacity in environmentally sensitive locations like the Puget Sound. Maritime commerce cannot come at the expense of the environment. This bill includes provisions that begin addressing the mariner shortage by updating mariner requirements, updating the merchant mariner credentialing exam, and expanding the pool of eligible mariners. And finally, and importantly, the bill includes numerous provisions to address sexual assault and sexual harassment within the Coast Guard. These new requirements, directives, and oversight were developed because the Coast Guard deliberately hid Operation Fouled Anchor and decades of sexual misconduct within the Coast Guard. Former Commandant Admiral Fagan worked hard to repair this lost confidence that resulted from Operation Fouled Anchor, and this legislation builds on her work. Again, I want to thank Chair Graves, Chair Ezell, Ranking Member Carbajal, and others for their cooperation in crafting this critical legislation. I look forward to our continued collaboration as this legislation moves forward, and I urge all members to support the bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves.
Yes.
The gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I'd yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Webster.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm very pleased to support House H.R. 4275 to ensure that the Coast Guard has the authorities and resources needed to meet the vital missions that they have. The One Big Beautiful Bill provides the Coast Guard a much-needed and historic down payment of $24 billion for new operational assets and systems. But this bill still needs to support the important work of the Coast Guard, which does protect our waters through drug interdiction and stop human trafficking, promote maritime safety. It also establishes a Secretary of the Coast Guard, an important step in the right direction to ensure that the Coast Guard men and women retain a priority for many administrations to come. The other armed services have this position, and they also do much better, and they have a better track record in getting assets necessary to carry out their missions. I'm thrilled that President Trump and Secretary Noem have focused on the Coast Guard, and I'm hopeful that this year the Senate also will move to pass this important legislation. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the rest of my time.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to yield 2 minutes to the representative from California, Mr. Desaulnier.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I want to thank the ranking member for yielding to me. I want to acknowledge to the leadership of the chair and the ranking members of the full committee and the subcommittee for their great bipartisan work on this initiative. One of the Coast Guard's primary missions is search and rescue. In fiscal year 2025 alone, their efforts saved more than 2,200 people and $40 million in property. To keep up this important work, they need robust funding and support, which is just what this bill delivers. With the administration's aggressive funding and staffing cuts, however, at the National Weather Service and FEMA, and the increasing severity and frequency of natural disasters due, in my opinion, to climate change, the risk associated with those disasters continue to rise. Unfortunately, we don't have to look any further than recent floods and devastating storms of how important the Coast Guard can be in responding to these emergencies and disasters, but they need their partners at FEMA and NOAA. I strongly support this bill and the great work of the Coast Guard that they do to protect our citizens and waters, including in and around the district I represent in the San Francisco Bay Area. I also ask my colleagues to continue to endeavor to invest not just in the Coast Guard, but in their partner agencies like FEMA and the Weather Service to ensure safety and mission readiness. Thank you, and I yield back.
And from reserves?
Yes, reserve.
The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I'd yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McDowell.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Speaker, today and every day, the brave men and women of the United States Coast Guard carry out a critical mission, securing our borders, patrolling our waters, and saving American lives. As Vice Chair of the Coast Guard and Maritime Subcommittee, I have seen firsthand how vital their service is to our national security and to our prosperity. The Coast Guard Authorization Act gives our guardsmen the tools, the resources, and the support that they need to meet today's threats, whether it's stopping fentanyl at sea, stopping illegal migrants, or responding to natural disasters. This bill is about backing the Coast Guard the same way that they back us every single day. I'm proud to support this bill, and I would urge my colleagues to do the same. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman from Missouri reserves. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to yield 3 minutes to the representative from New York, Ms. Gillen.
Thank you, Madam
gentlewoman
Speaker,
is
and
recognized.
thank you to the gentleman from California for yielding. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 4275, the Bipartisan Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2025, which includes my provision to improve navigation in the East Rockaway Inlet off the south shore of Long Island to strengthen maritime drug enforcement in our waters. Madam Speaker, East Rockaway Inlet is a critical federal navigation channel which Long Islanders rely on for both commercial and recreational boating and fishing. While the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for maintenance dredging of the inlet, the Coast Guard maintains the markers and the buoys to aid in navigation and to keep boaters safe. Unfortunately, I've heard from many of my constituents that due to shoaling, the water is too shallow in many parts of the inlet and the buoys there are missing or misplaced, making it difficult for boaters and fishermen to safely navigate the channel. Incorrectly placed buoys and markers could cause boats to run aground in the sand, threaten commercial towing through the channel, and undermine safe navigation for all. My amendment, which is included in Section 283 of this bill, would require the Commandant of the Coast Guard to examine this issue and report to Congress with concrete recommendations to address hazards in the East Rockaway Inlet and present a plan to update the aids to navigation there to keep boaters safe. I'm grateful to Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Larson for including this amendment, and I look forward to working together with the Coast Guard on this important issue. Madam Speaker, this bill will also strengthen our national security and support the men and women I met at the Coast Guard station in Jones Beach. This bipartisan bill will ensure that the Coast Guard has the resources that it needs to keep our shores and our communities secure. I'm especially glad that this legislation includes a common sense bipartisan bill I co-sponsored with my Republican colleague from North Carolina, Representative Addison McDowell, to help the Coast Guard respond to opioid overdoses. Our brave Coast Guardsmen are the first line of defense against illegal drug traffickers on our water, and this legislation will ensure that they have the tools that they need to combat opioid overdoses and close loopholes that drug traffickers seek to exploit. Madam Speaker, in closing, I urge all of my colleagues to join me in supporting this important bill, and I yield back the rest of my time.
The gentleman reserves.
Madam Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I don't have any more speakers, so I will reserve the balance of my time, and I am prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's no more speakers on our end. I'll make my closing statement. I support H.R. 4275, the Coast Guard's Authorization Act of 2025, and I encourage all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do the same. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, this legislation provides the support for the men and women of the Coast Guard to be able to do their jobs. As we know, these service members often go above and beyond the call of duty, including when responding to emergencies and disasters. And that fact was clearly demonstrated during the response to the tragic flooding in Texas over the 4th of July holiday weekend. Petty Officer Scott Ruskin and the Rescue 6553 air crew were first on scene at Camp Mystic, the historic girls' camp that was caught in the catastrophic flooding and helped save 165 lives. The men and women who serve in the Coast Guard carry out heroic acts each and every day, and it's our responsibility to make sure that they have the resources that they need to carry out their missions. I would like to take just a moment to thank my subcommittee staff who worked tirelessly on this legislation: John Rayfield, Reed Linsk, Lindsay Sakal, Spencer Thompson, Nicole Bredario, as well as Matt Dyer and the ranking members team as well. Madam Speaker, with that, I would urge support of the bill on both sides of the aisle and would yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4275 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the
Madam
affirmative,
Speaker.
the gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
I'd ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number have risen. The yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1549 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 11, H.R. 1549, a bill to require the Secretary of the Treasury to conduct a study and report on the exposure of the United States to the financial sector of the People's Republic of China and for other purposes.
The gentleman will suspend. Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Williams, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this bill.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 1549, the China Financial Threat Mitigation Act. The Chinese Communist Party's track record of interference and aggression towards the American financial system is a serious and growing threat. The CCP has a well-documented history of abusing international financial norms, jeopardizing both our national and economic security in the process. From manipulating currency and distorting markets to propping up state-owned industries and weaponizing finance for geopolitical gain, the CCP's actions are not just unfair, they are downright dangerous. These predatory practices harm American businesses, erode trust in global markets, and risk empowering China to pressure developing nations and destabilize debt markets for its own benefit. We cannot afford to sit back and take our eye off the ball. We must be prepared. That is why I introduced the China Financial Threat Mitigation Act. This bill is a proactive measure that requires the Department of Treasury to identify financial risks posed by the Chinese economy and offer recommendations for strengthening international cooperation to monitor and counter these threats. Our top priority should always be to defend Western values, promote American interests, and hold bad actors accountable. This legislation is a critical step in confronting the CCP's abuse of the financial system head-on. I want to thank the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Gottenheimer, for co-leading this important effort with me. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1549. In God we trust. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is now recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 1549, the China Financial Threat Mitigation Act, sponsored by Mr. Williams of Texas and Mr. Gottheimer of New Jersey. The People's Republic of China continues to pose a significant challenge to America's economy and financial system. This doesn't mean that China is simply an economic competitor, but rather China has taken an aggressive adversarial posture towards American influence and power globally, leveraging its growing economic strength to do so. To address concerns raised by China's conduct in this regard, American policymakers, including members of Congress, need accurate data about the potential risk posed. This includes information about trade, both legal and illegal investments, demographics, subsidies for domestic industry, demand for oil, and economic growth. Unfortunately, despite these needs, the economic data available directly from China is generally limited and unreliable. Even China's gross domestic product figures are regarded as questionable. This bill asks for a detailed study on these issues. The bill would also require recommendations for additional actions to strengthen international cooperation to mitigate risk and protect U.S. interests. The House previously passed this bill 4 times in the last 3 Congresses, and I hope we can finally pass it into law. And so, Congressman Williams, I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm including in the record the CBO estimate for this bill.
No objection.
And I reserve, and I am prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from California.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close if the gentleman from Texas has no further speakers.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself the balance of the time.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank Representative Williams of Texas and Representatives Gottheimer for sponsoring this bill. Their bipartisan work resulted in a unanimous vote during our Financial Services Committee markup earlier this year, reflecting our shared concerns about the aggressive economic and commercial activities of the government of the People's Republic of China. And so I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I yield myself the balance of my time. For the reasons I explained earlier, I urge my colleagues to support this bill. I do want to thank Congressman Gottenheimer and my good friend, Ms. Waters, for their support. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1549 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the chair.